You're watching News 24 Live. It's Monday, the 11th of May. I'm joined in studio this morning by our sports pundits from Sport 24, editor Garen Lamley and chief writer Rob Howing to do a recap of the weekend's action and results. Gents, good morning. Thanks for coming in.
Morning, Nick.
Garen, I'm going to start with you. The Super Rugby this weekend, I guess a lot of the results went the way you predicted last week, other than the Lions upsetting the Highlanders and the Force upsetting the Waratahs. The Lions really seem to be on a roll. Right?
They do. You know, they've certainly kept their playoff hopes alive. Hats off to them. I think we're all sort of expecting them to fall short a little bit at some point. But as long as they keep winning, they're in with a shout. You know, obviously the Stormers won as well. The Bulls didn't play, so the Lions are still there and thereabouts. The Bulls still have to go on tour. So the Lions have got a fighter's chance of making the playoffs. You know, they really have to just either finish first or second, perhaps in the South African Conference, to get through. It doesn't really matter how many matches they win. It all depends on how many the Stormers and the Bulls win or lose. So, you know, they've still got a match against the Stormers, which is, you know, shaping up to be a key clash. They're only 3 points behind. You know, that's a victory, and they're through. And they're a never say die team. They play for the full 80 minutes. They're superbly led by Warren Whiteley. I thought they were dead and buried, to be honest, against the Highlanders at half-time, 20 points to 3 down. But they came back in the second half. I think maybe the altitude and jet lag caught up with the Highlanders. And the Lions pulled it through. You know, helped a lot by Elton Jantjies coming on in the second half. He's playing some amazing rugby, sort of the sort of performances that could well see him getting a call up to the Rugby World Cup South African squad. So, you know, long may it continue for the Lions. You know, they're really, really looking good.
Rob, anything else that stood out for you this weekend? I think, I forgot to mention there, the Rebels, the result they got against the Blues was quite remarkable.
Yeah, they're the surprise packages. They're still in a little bit in the running. I don't think we're going to see 2 Australian teams getting into the playoffs the way things are shaping. In fact, we may only see 1 because, of course, the Brumbies are now wobbling a fair bit and have got quite a lot of catch-up to do if they want to. They were normally the sort of team that would fancy themselves to be top 6 material. But you've got the Waratahs now sort of stung by another defeat. So that Australian conference has been thrown into a certain amount of turmoil. I've got to admit that was my one sort of really spectacular gaffe for the weekend. I had actually thought that perhaps the Rebels had sort of, after putting in such a famous effort to knock over the Chiefs, might be a little bit fatigued. But boy, I mean, they hit the ground running again and pretty much wiped out the Blues. I'm afraid back to normal service for the Blues. They'd had a win the previous week against the Force, but it was a bit of a false dawn because they then got pretty much thumped at the weekend. I think they went down by 5 tries to 3, which tells you their defence is still pretty ropey, and something the Bulls might want to cash in on, by the way, when they play them this week. So there was, even while the Bulls were out of action, a few positive signs for them to sort of look at ahead of their game.
And the Sharks' performance, perhaps a bit more impressive than we anticipated. I mean, against the log leaders.
Yeah, it certainly was. They were in the game for long periods, which was, I think, was really what their fans were praying for. I don't think too many of us would have really gone for the Sharks to win it, although at times that upset sort of flickered quite promisingly. And there was also a very controversial, that driving maul incident where they went back to TMO and it was ruled out. John Mitchell was among the first people, and of course he's a New Zealander, to say that he felt the Sharks had been robbed there. Although I see he changed his mind a little bit about after watching replays. It shows you how technical that area is. And as Garen and I both agree, I think the rolling maul is something that you'd almost like to see. It's become such a painfully, obviously used device by South African teams to rumble their way to tries, that you'd almost like to see some sort of legislation against it, or at least more consistency in the way that it is policed. But yeah, just going back to the Sharks, at least a few positives to bank now for the rest of the tour. At least they show that there's still some gears in the dressing room. I see they had a few knocks. At one stage there were about 3 Sharks lying sprawled all over the turf, and you thought, oh boy, is that going to be another 3 Sharks players on the plane home or something? But I see that there's now a fair talk that people like Bismarck du Plessis, Loazi Mvovo might actually come through okay to be able to play against the Waratahs this weekend. So I suppose you can say hope springs eternal. The Waratahs are not the sort of side that the Sharks generally do that well against. But if they can muster the sort of passion that they showed this last weekend, then at least they're not completely blown out of the water.